involved with RSN for nearly 15 years. Support from someone who's been there makes all the difference.
Hey David, what are you listening to?
Kidney Talk, an online radio podcast that talks about kidney disease and the prevention of it.
Oh, cool. Where can I find that?
Oh, you can download it on iHeartRadio, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.
Oh, nice. I'll definitely have to download that.
Shout out to Renal Support Network, the annual Renal Support Network essay contest. I won the Renal Support Network contest last year, the Warrior, and we are all warriors. So thank you. Keep on doing all that you do, and be happy and healthy and keep the hope. Thank you, Renal Support Network. Woohoo!
As a kidney transplant recipient, I find that having an actual publication like Kidney Talk is an invaluable resource for any kidney warrior at any stage.
RSN keeps me informed of kidney advocacy issues so my voice can be heard.
I'm really looking forward to the prom this year and meeting people who are just like me. Dressing up is super fun and all the activities are amazing. Can't wait to see you there.
Hi, I've been participating in the Renal Support Network 30-minute fitness Zoom classes. Not only have I lost 15 pounds, but I can also strike a yoga pose like this.
When I created Renal Support Network back in 1993, I had no idea the impact that I would have among my peers. An illness is too demanding when you don't have hope, and peer support, education, and knowledge are crucial to our survival. We have a great week planned with some incredible speakers, great information for you to share, learn, so we can survive and thrive with this illness. It's imperative. So stay tuned. We're going to have a great event, and a shout out to our corporate mission partners for making this happen.
Hi, my name is Mary Beth Callahan, and I'm a social worker. I've worked with kidney disease, kidney patients and families for over 3 decades now, and I'm very happy to provide a few thoughts to you all on how to work through stress and anxiety during these very stressful and anxious times. I am also sorry that I could not quite figure out the appropriate way to have my picture on the side of this, but I'm smiling. Just kind of keep that in your mind that I'm smiling at you now and I'm happy to be with you. When we think about stress and anxiety, many times there are so many things out of balance that it's, hard to know what starts it. Is it the physical waking up aching that then is discouraging and leads to a little bit of fogginess in thinking, maybe a lot of fogginess in thinking, especially if it goes on for days at a time? And then how is our spirituality feeling about what's happening? How is this all kind of being calculated together? And then, of course, in these times, we also have COVID that in some form or fashion has affected all of us. And whether that's a family member dying, a friend dying, or perhaps you've had it yourself. Perhaps you're wondering about whether to take the vaccine, whether not to take the vaccine, the isolation that it's brought us. It's been a difficult time, I think, for all of us. And this brings about emotional disequilibrium that can result in loss, and change, compromise, and uncertainty. And these different feelings that come to us result in depression, anxiety and fear, sometimes anger, dependency, and it's difficult to negotiate this emotional disequilibrium that we're feeling. And I think particularly now during the pandemic, we're not quite sure when to think it will get better. Certainly, we think with the initiation of vaccination that it will become better, but we don't exactly know the time frame. So again, there's that uncertainty. And with all of this comes to adding chronic illness. And for most of you listening as patients, that would be kidney disease in some form or fashion, kidney treatment. However, I imagine there'll be some caregivers listening also, and you probably have some chronic illnesses, some of you yourselves, which may be anything not related to kidney disease or kidney disease as well. So this whole adjustment to illness helps us to have to manage change, adjustment, and anxiety and stress. Anxiety and stress and depression increases with physical isolation, when there are activities we can't do, when we've watched our favorite show all through the 17 seasons that it had, and now we're hoping to find something new, when we've started knitting and ripped out over and over again. There are events that we can't attend or that we can't control. Sometimes if we're invited to an event and would really like to go and think, well, maybe I would go if everyone was going to wear a mask. We don't control whether they're going to wear a mask or not. People we can't see in person. Certainly for me, we've taken to having regular Zoom calls in a few of my friend groups. And one of the friend groups has a little bit more technical difficulty. Of course, I'm right there. And so we do most of those calls by phone, but we have a set time each week where we meet to talk. And then there's the struggle between work and home and needed medical care. I know, unfortunately, I confess that I have put off a few things that I probably wouldn't have done in other situations. I don't think that these are serious, and I have been to some of my doctor appointments and done a lot of telehealth. But when I get my second vaccine, I hope to go get a little bit more thorough evaluation. So again, there's that tension, that conflict that we're probably all experiencing in some form or fashion. And that often creates anxiety. And anxiety affects each of us differently. For some of us, I know for me, I feel overwhelmed. I can't think clearly when I'm anxious. And I become pretty grouchy, gripey to the people around me. And anxiety could be caused by a new medication regimen. I feel like when people come out of the hospital after a transplant, while, you know, a person might be so grateful for the opportunity to get a kidney, it is still very difficult often to manage the new medications and to manage expectations from others, because now maybe you're not on dialysis and they were used to the fluctuations that happen sometimes if you're doing hemodialysis in center, you know, often due to the changes in blood pressure while you're there. And so the expectations might be different and create some anxiety as well. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes anxiety and anger are often a byproduct of depression. And this can all be kind of sneaky to sort out. So I encourage you to speak with a professional or a trusted friend. Sometimes, when we can just verbalize something, we often find our own answers. But it can help us sort things out as well. Right now, there are just so many feelings that we've probably all experienced in the last year. And certainly, I hope that even though joy is not on this list of feelings, I do hope that we've all experienced some moments of joy in one way or another, moments of blessing. But there are a lot of feelings that kind of sneak up on us sometimes, and we're not entirely sure what we're feeling. Because sometimes for me, if I'm feeling yuck and I can figure out how to name the feeling, it helps me kind of sort out what I might best do to help myself get to the other side of that. But I find it complicated sometimes. And then dealing with depression can come from many reasons and many situations. Chronic illness certainly brings about moments of depression, days of depression. We sometimes think of depression that really might need to be addressed more thoroughly as feelings of depression that last more than 2 weeks. But certainly, if we've experienced depression previously in our life, then another depressive episode can sneak up on us pretty quickly. There's a greater likelihood of that. Our family history makes us, predisposed to more likely than not have depression. It doesn't always happen, but there is research that supports that. And then sometimes there are situational imbalances. People leave our family. There's a good thing. Someone is going off to college, a child is going off to college, but it's also changing the system, the family system. And so this can lead to some loss that we talked about with that disequilibrium early on. And then chronic pain is very difficult to deal with. And we know that research supports that depression and chronic pain can sometimes go hand in hand and increase each other, which really makes it even more difficult for those of us that have experienced that or may experience that in the future. The other thing is what keeps you up at night, because sleeping is very important. Sometimes it's finances related to COVID and all that's happened. Sometimes it's illness related to ourselves or our friends. Our loved ones are sometimes going through problems. It's difficult to be so confined and isolated and not experience some family disagreements at a heightened level that maybe if we were getting out more wouldn't occur. And then there's that uncertainty we talked about in wondering if and when life is going to get back to what it was before COVID. The other thing that keeps me up at night sometimes is, why did I say that? Just thinking over and over in your mind, wishing that you hadn't said something or done something during the day. Lots of reasons that keep us up at night. Additionally, sometimes medications. Sometimes it's the timing of a medication, whether we take it in the morning or in the evening, that might make it more difficult or easier for us to fall asleep. There's worry and depression. There's napping in the recliner while I'm watching a TV show. Oh, that was about me, sorry. But napping. And then restless legs. Some of you may suffer from restless legs, which is really a problem in trying to get sleep. And so when we're losing sleep, it also makes it harder to think sometimes during the time that we are awake. And sometimes the imbalances that we spoke about, we can know with our mind what's going on, but sometimes our heart needs more time to accept what our mind already knows. And I may have stolen this quote from Renal Support Network some years ago. I'm not sure, but I have it up in my office as well. And then I think especially COVID has made locus of control something for us to think more and more about. What's inside of our control and what's outside of our control, and what can we do about it? What can we not do about it? And, you know, now the holidays were, of course, a difficult time to think about, were you going to join with family? Were you not going to join with family? How were you going to connect? How are you not going to feel alone? So sometimes there are things that we can control, and other times there are things that are outside of our control. I'd say, for instance, the rollout of the vaccination. It seems difficult and outside of our control. And what might be inside of our control is registering with the state that we can get it as soon as possible. Some of the pharmacies will be having rollouts, and so that might be inside our control. I bring you this slide because many years ago, I was part of the Council of Nephrology Social Workers on the executive committee, and a program was developed called Living Longer, Living Better. And it was designed for the social worker to partner with the patient to help determine maybe which one of these possible wellness goals might be an important one for them to consider, and to make a plan about how to move closer to it. This is something that is often in our control. Avoiding eating too much salt. I love potato chips. I just love potato chips. So besides not buying them, which is not something that I always succeed at, I have to place them high on a shelf where I have to climb something to reach them. So it takes me a little bit more thought to think, do I need to really have that? Can I make it a smaller portion than I was planning, which could sometimes be the whole bag? Now, what is schema and why does it matter? Schema is the way we think about ourselves that comes from our previous experiences. And we can develop new thought processes. We've all probably done that in one way or another, good or bad. But sometimes if we're experiencing an illness and we feel weak or frail, unworthy or guilty or shameful, our response to what's in our control and what we can do to help ourselves move through it is different than if we see ourselves as being strong and resilient, and I can be chill about this. How can I be chill about this? You know, one year, almost every year, my New Year's hope is that I will respond rather than react. And that goes around being a little bit more chill for me. That doesn't come naturally to me. This is from cognitive behavioral therapy. I believe that Mark Meyer did a great job talking about some of this, but just as an example, I'd like for you to think about how our thoughts and emotions and behaviors really do impact one another often. There are some days where, for whatever reason, which I really can't tell you, I can wake up being in a funk, just not feeling right, not feeling joyful, just feeling really grumpy. And I've learned that if I can, as soon as get things caught up at work, as soon as I can maybe get outside and walk for even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something about that behavior of walking allows me to change my thoughts, which then I come back feeling a little better. Now, this is a very small illustration of how that can work. It can be any number of things, but I do believe that this triangle from cognitive behavioral therapy, and Aaron Beck was one of the early people that published on this, Aaron Beck, B-E-C-K. I think this can be helpful to us in coping with any of the difficulties that come our way. I imagine that because you are listening to this, you are resilient. You've been through pain, you might be in pain now, fearful, doubtful, and yet you are resilient and there is courage because you have experienced something in the past that you got through. I remember one time I was taking a group of Girl Scouts on a outward bound experience. And number one, I do not think I was ever a good Girl Scout leader. And number two, I am not the hiking, climbing, camping girl. So this was really difficult for me. So got through the experience. The girls laughed at me a lot. I think that was okay. I didn't mind that at all. And then some years later, I needed to go through chemotherapy. And it was a difficult experience. And I remember some days just thinking, I climbed to the top of the mountain. I can get through today. And so sometimes we have to think about what got us through those previous times of great difficulty that can give us courage to get through the next minute, sometimes the next hour or the day. I also think it's important, as I mentioned that too, think about breaking up expectations so that it is in smaller chunks. Thinking about the whole year ahead is just way too overwhelming for me. I think it's encouraging to think that hope is a cognitive process that can both be learned and practiced, and that resilience comes from practicing hope. And those of you who are involved with Renal Support Network and Lori in particular, thank you for giving us so much hope, inspiration, and sometimes I get very tired just watching what you've done by 9:30 in the morning, Lori. So it kind of kicks me up that thinks, okay, get up and get moving a little more quickly because Lori's already made 3 necklaces. So anyway, practicing resilience comes from practicing hope. What about writing down the good stuff? You know, I'm not good at keeping a journal, a book journal, and I've tried typing in a journal online, not online, but in my computer, thinking that would be better. And so one time I was in counseling and the therapist said, well, why don't you just take sticky notes, if it has to be sticky notes, and write down what was good in the moment that it happens or at the end of the day and put it somewhere so that you can see of good things are happening. And I recently read online where someone started a new jar every year. And then the week between Christmas and New Year's, they sat down as a family and read some of the things that had happened during that year that had brought good stuff to them. And I think it's important for me, and perhaps for you also, to keep in mind that, it's mostly the small joys in life that come our way. Marriage, graduations, getting an award. Those things rarely happen. And if we wait for that, we're not going to have very much stuff in our jar. So keeping in mind the small joys, which may even be a pet on your lap. Now, Brene Brown is someone that I like to listen to and who's written some books I like to read. She does have a very Texas accent. And so if that bothers you, you may not like her podcast at all, which I'll bring up later. But she, really writes about how we practice gratitude. And a key to gratitude is to find the value in ordinary moments. And there is a lot of good stuff in what she has written and in her podcast, if you can stand a Texas accent. What about triggers? We all have different triggers that trigger different things. And I'm not talking about Roy Rogers, for those of you who are old enough to know what I mean. But sometimes happiness can be a trigger because we're thinking, goodness, everything is going too well. I'm feeling good. No one's sick in my family. We have a job. We have a car. Things are great. So when is the bottom going to fall out? And that could be because that's what happened at a point when we were growing up. It could be because of that's what happened to your mate, your partner, your spouse. But if we can be aware of triggers, and sometimes it's perfectionism, that there was a time when I really felt things had to be perfect, like I would have not probably done this presentation without being able to do it the proper way as all the other presenters did. But, life is what it is. And so if we can recognize it, I think it's just easier to take some of the power away from it. And here's another list of feelings. How many feelings can wash over us from time to time, can really sneak up on us. One of the things that I really like to think about is when I feel really bad during a day, emotionally, for whatever reason, or feel troubled by a question that I need to get resolved. I have lived long enough to know that there's a good chance I'll wake up feeling better about it the next day. I think that with all the feelings that come with chronic illness and the extension of how families and caregivers are intertwined with chronic illness, an idea is to learn to successfully manage the ups and downs by riding the waves. I have a migraine issue. I've had it since I was 8 years old, at least. And I'm afraid to plan things sometimes because I know that there's a good chance that whatever leads up to that, I'll have a migraine. And yet, what I'm trying to do now is to say, I'm going to plan this. I'd like to go. If I don't feel well enough to go, I want y'all to go. And that will make me feel the best. Trying to get your family involved with ways to help you with riding the waves and maybe teaching them how to ride the waves as well. And then what happens in the in-between is that we're going to have good days and bad days. our perception of our quality of life is going to change over time. Illnesses, losses, so many things. Rehabilitation, when we become ill or have an accident of some sort, it's really hard to move toward rehabilitation. That exercise, physical therapy can be really tough, but we want to restore as much as possible. And our personal growth and goals may be kind of like the waves. Sometimes it's not exactly what we thought we would be doing or what we wanted to be doing, but I think that we recognize so much in failure, in making mistakes. And then in our relationships, sometimes it's important to really be able to verbalize what we need, what we would like. And many of us haven't grown up in families where that was done. So that is a foreign concept, but it's something to think about and something that can be learned. Now, you're going to see this slide twice because I really do think it's very important to think about physical activity. You know, we become deconditioned as we are in periods of inactivity. I don't know about y'all, but I know that I've sat in my recliner for much more of a time during this last year than I normally would. And yet, in its own way, early in the year, I developed some heart problem, and then unrelatedly, about 3 weeks later, I fell and broke my kneecap, which led to a lot of physical therapy and much more exercise than I had been doing. So in the end, all of this probably it helps my heart and my overall well-being. But if we become inactive for too long, we're going to become deconditioned, and we're going to then start feeling bad about that, and then it kind of goes into a downward spiral. Any physical activity helps. Sometimes when I'm working during the workday, I'll just walk to the far end of the hallway and back a few times while I'm on a phone call, just to get up and move around. For greater physical activity and exercise regimens, always good to check with your doctor and make a commitment, not all or nothing, but maybe 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Could make a real difference. Just a thought. And then sometimes our bodies go through periods where we may need help with the synapses, the serotonin or the norepinephrine that is supposed to stay between the neurons as our mind kind of click, 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 clicks during the day. And when our body really needs this, it's almost like if your body needs insulin, or if you have atrial fibrillation, your body needs something to keep the heart beating on a good pace. So I consider medication for depression, when appropriate, to be very helpful. It may be something that a person would only need for 6 months or so. I never recommend trying it for 2 weeks and then giving up, because that's discouraging. And really, there are so many good medications out there now that it doesn't really give your body the opportunity to get what it needs. Also, in talking about medications, if you have the insurance ability to do that, I do find that that is what psychiatrists specialize in. And sometimes they are the best to prescribe that medication. They don't always provide counseling. That isn't exactly what they do anymore. It's more medication assessment. So, setting your mind to the idea that I'm going to go to the specialist for depression, just like I go to the specialist for my kidney or the specialist for my heart. The other thing I wanted to talk briefly about is what's on the screen now. Sometimes when anxiety really seems overwhelming, grounding is a technique that is just easy to kind of bring you back to the present. It just involves thinking about your senses. Try to find 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And by the end of that, some of the anxiety may be decreased, because sometimes when our anxiety lessens, we can then see a path forward, which is so helpful, right? Now, sometimes yoga and meditation work great for people. Sometimes they don't. I have to have very gentle yoga to make it work for me. And I will never be one of those people that can do extreme yoga, but I do find that it can be helpful. We've got to find our own path. And again, I bring this up about physical activity, mainly wanting to remind you that if we don't use it, we lose it. And that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Making a small commitment to even get up safely off a chair without holding onto the sides, if that's a safe thing that we can do, that makes a difference. Exercise. Renal Support Network actually has a virtual class on Zoom Monday through Thursday. So that's pretty convenient. And if you're on dialysis, I just kind of want you to think that there is a way to exercise also. This booklet on the screen comes from the Life Options Rehabilitation Advisory Council. The website will be up later, but it's lifeoptions.org. And this is available free online for you as well. And it gives you really a lot of ideas, and it cancels out a lot of excuses that I've thought of personally myself. So I'm just saying it might be a resource for you. During these times, it is important to just have as a backup availability of 24-hour help that might be available if you need it. So I wanted to be sure that you get this information and know that it can be useful. And we never know when any of us might need something like this. So there are many things in life that, as we know, are overwhelming from time to time. One of the good things, I guess, maybe about COVID is that it has brought about more virtual resources than we previously had. These are the names of some of them: BetterHelp, Calm, Talkspace, Happify. You know, the Renal Support Network Talk Line has been a great resource for a long time, but it has brought about resources that we may have not thought about previously, and support groups that would have not occurred previously. The Unlocking Us podcast that I referred to earlier by Brene Brown is, I think, very insightful. She has good guests on, makes me think through a lot of things. But it's certainly not going to be for everyone. I wanted to give you some other ideas of podcast, and the Kidney Talk podcast that's available from Renal Support Network. Also, the National Coordinating Center for End-Stage Renal Disease has resources on its page as well. These are some of the resources that I spoke about earlier, and these slides will be made available to you. This is information on the National Coordinating Center that has ideas both for staff members and patients in multiple pages. It's not just this. This is just a snippet from there. Now, this is just an example of different things bringing us happiness. And my dog Rufus, our dog Rufus, really likes to be lazy. And this also can make me lazy, but at the same time, it's very calming to me and brings me great joy. So I'd like to leave you with the thought that when you can't find the sunshine, be the sunshine. And I know that many of you are through all the things that you're already doing. And I give great thanks, gratitude to all involved with Renal Support Network, especially Lori. Thank you so much.
And a shout out to our corporate mission partners for making this happen.